Do you find it hard to explain to friends and family what you now do? Are you wasting valuable time by attempting to figure out challenges on your own? We have created a community for ex-corporate people running their own business who want to live a life they love whilst giving back to their community. This is the Build, Live, Give show. We bring you first-hand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day. We get real with no corporate BS. And now your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome to the Build, Live, Give podcast, episode number 17. I'm Paul Higgins and I'm your show host. And today we've got a very special guest, Ilana Wechsler from Green Arrow Digital. Ilana had a bit of a life-changing moment. She actually had a near-death experience to do with childbirth. She will mention that in the podcast. It's really quite touching, and that really forced her hand into leaving a very successful career in finance to go and start her own small business. And the finance industry just wasn't flexible enough for working mums. So she talks through that. And she talks about also some of the struggles of running a pay-per-click agency using virtual staff and some of the techniques she's used to come around that, and also some of the struggles that she's still having there. But she's a fantastic lady. She's got really high integrity, and I really love this interview with Ilana. And the topic of PPC or pay-per-click is really important for a lot of our BLG listeners. So what's been happening in the BLG community? It continues to grow. So thanks for all those 5-star reviews. Keep them coming. And also, if you love the show, please subscribe to the show. That'd be great. So the more that you subscribe and the more that we have some 5-star reviews, it just builds this wonderful community. So why don't you get ready to take some notes? And what we'll do now is hand it over to Ilana. Ilana's from Green Arrow Digital, and we're going to find a little bit more about her and her business as we go through this great podcast. But why don't we just start with a bit of backstory from you, Ilana?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the show, Paul.
My pleasure.
So my backstory is I come from a corporate world. I studied IT and finance at uni. So straight out of uni, I worked as a computer programmer. Please don't hold that against me, even though I was terrible at it. And then I decided I really can't write code all day. So then I worked in finance, and I worked as kind of like a data analyst for sort of, I guess, probably about 10 years at a few different corporate organizations, some big, some small. And then, that's sort of where I left to then start my own thing. So I guess my background is corporate.
Great. And when did you leave?
I left in 2008, so a while ago now, coming up to my 10-year anniversary next year.
Excellent. And what was sort of that feeling, if you can take the listeners back to when you made that decision, what was sort of going on for you at the time?
I actually really enjoyed what I did. I really enjoyed the people I worked with and the nature of the work. So I had, so what prompted it for me was actually the birth of my first child. And I had every intention actually of returning after my first child was born. And a series of events happened. I had a major complication in my pregnancy, which made me reevaluate how much time I was spending at my job. Right. And also I couldn't really go back to my job part-time. They wanted me to work full-time. And I just, given the complication that I'd had and nearly losing my son, I didn't want to leave him, actually. So that was... the situation was kind of forced on me, but no regrets, and been the best thing that ever happened. And I think, like, had that not happened, I probably would have gone back, and I would have been one of those mums that kind of only sees their kids on the weekend, which is fine too. I certainly don't judge other people for that. It just didn't suit me at that time.
Sure. And if you don't mind me asking, everything's fine now with your son?
Yeah, absolutely. He's it was just during... I'd had a major complication, and we came very, very close to losing him. Wow. which was very scary. And as you know, when life kind of takes a dramatic turn and doesn't go according to plan, it makes you really reevaluate things. And that's what happened to me. So yeah, I guess you can't really prepare for that when that happens. But it's all good, and he's totally fine. It just, I took a left turn instead of going straight.
Great, that sliding doors moment.
And, it really was, yeah.
Yeah, and can you remember, obviously there would have been a lot of emotions around that time, but can you remember some of the fears that you had when you were stepping out of that environment and going to do something yourself?
Oh, yeah, because the decision was kind of forced on me, it's not like I had an idea of what I was going to do. And I had these sort of, I'm doing air quotes, you can't see me, but I had all these skills, but it's like, well, how can I apply that on my own? Like, I was really good at Microsoft Excel and creating databases, linking Excel, and I had all these data skills, but I just thought, well, how can I use this? So it was really scary going out on my own, because I just thought, what can I do? How do I use this? So I can appreciate lots of people who are starting out, but I guess it's different because they possibly have an idea already, but I didn't have an idea, which was a different challenge.
But you'd be amazed how many people, like I was one of those. I sort of had a rough idea, but to be honest, I just ended up making the jump, and then it was pivoting all the time to what it is now. So I didn't actually have, and for any listeners out there thinking you'll wait for the perfect moment when you're going to get that fantastic idea, my advice is just make a move, and it's going to iterate. There's nothing planned about running your own business at all. So if you really are unhappy in the situation you're in, or you really aspire to go and do something, just take that step. That would be my advice from my experience. What about for you, Ilana, given the fact you've gone through it?
100%. And it's the kind of thing that, like, you start at point A and then you pivot to point B, and you might end up at point G, let's say, but you wouldn't have known about point G had you not started at point A and pivoted along the way. And that's why it's just so important, I think, to start, because what I started doing, which was Excel consulting, which is funny, is not what I do now. I do completely stuff. So, but I never would have got there had I not started. It was such a journey. And I think it's really important also to try and enjoy the journey, because you have to have faith in the journey.
Yeah, look, that's great advice. And what sort of help did you get as you went through that journey?
Oh, God, lots of help. So I guess it was just a constant learning process. I had a friend in the United States who I had met many years before, who was really entrepreneurial, and I was telling him what I was trying to do and how I wanted to sort of at least try and do something online, because I wanted to be at home with my son. And he introduced me to affiliate marketing, which was huge in America, but somewhat non-existent here. And I never even heard of affiliate marketing, so that sort of sparked its own journey. So he helped me to a certain point, and then I sort of took over from there, and at various points met lots of different people. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. That's great, and I think it's really important to get that inspiration from others. I know for a lot of listeners and a lot of people we have on the show that it can be a lonely journey, and I think if you can get help and ask for those that have gone before you, I think can really help. And if you sort of fast forward to today, how do you sort of make revenue, and what do you do today?
Right. So today I have a pretty specialised digital agency. So I do PPC management, so pay per click management. So I basically, business owners hire me to manage their Google AdWords and Facebook ad campaigns so I do it on their behalf. And most recently, I launched a training program where I teach business owners how they can do it themselves. So I either train marketing teams or individual business owners, because I find there's a bit of a shift going on in the market where business owners want a level of, they want to understand how to do it because it's such a crucial part of their online marketing. So yeah, I teach them how we do what we do for our clients. Some clients don't want to know about it. They just want us to do it, which is fine. But more and more people want to learn how to do it. So we teach them how to do that as well.
Great. And if you had just a couple of pieces of advice for those listeners out there that really have heard a lot about it, dabbled a bit in Facebook ads in particular, a lot of our listeners have done that. What would be some advice you'd give to help them on their journey?
Okay, so especially Facebook ads, they're like, I'm doing air quotes again, they're easy to set up. It's quite seamless, but there's a lot of kind of tricks and tips along the way. So I would say to people, if you're going to do it yourself, which you absolutely can, it's not rocket science, and really any business owner can do it themselves. But before you start, I would definitely educate yourself in some real kind of basic and classic and proven strategies that you can use in your business. For like remarketing, for example, which is showing ads to people who've been to your website before, is often the lowest hanging fruit. And there's someone who's starting out and don't educate themselves how to do it, they don't do remarketing, which is such a missed opportunity. So there's lots of like those classic strategies which we teach our coaching students, just so that you can get some really quick wins straight away, and then you can build on your account from there.
Great. And how do you go about finding your ideal client?
Me personally?
Yeah. For your business, how do you go about finding your clients?
Truthfully, it's like 100% referrals. And that, I mean, we've been doing it for a while now, so obviously we're quite known in the space, so referrals do come our way. But, if starting out, I didn't have a referral network. And initially I built contacts just through doing like business networking, actually, like the breakfasts.
Yes.
And for me, that was just really good to understand how to talk to business owners, because I was so in the detail of what I do, and it is quite technical and it is so very number focused, and business owners looked at me like I was talking another language, truthfully. So it was just a really good way that I could kind of find a way to talk to practice those conversations. So through business networking, I built, got my first few clients that way, and then from there it just sort of built. But I've done obviously some ads for my own business, but that's not the main way that I get new business.
Yeah, because it's funny. I suppose the analogy that comes to mind is a bit like plumbing. That you're always out helping other people, but you don't necessarily do the sort of work at home. I find a lot of, and I know you do a brilliant job in this area, but often people find their own clients through word of mouth. And it sounds like it's been similar for you.
It has been similar for me, yeah. And I think there's a lot of sharks in my industry, and I always kind of felt like if I was doing my own advertising, I'd be like on the back foot a little bit, and I just kind of didn't really want to have to try and sell someone. Like when people are referred to me, they're recommended to me, and that their person who they have recommended me sort of trusts them, and therefore it's a genuine lead rather than me having to put someone through a sales process. Like I just never had that. I just really enjoyed the PPC work, and then it just sort of organically happened.
Yeah, and look, for listeners, I actually went to Illana, I don't know, let's say 6 months ago, and said I want to do ABC, and you actually you said no, I don't think that's the right thing to do. Go away and do these things, and then come back to me. And there's not many people that do that, and they want to take the money. And I really value you for helping me. And the advice you gave me was spot on. But I think it's a credit that you did that, and it. So I just want to let listeners know that there are some really good people out there. You just got to find the right suppliers that do have your best interest at heart, because there are a lot of sharks, as Ilana said. Yeah. And thankfully, Ilana, you're definitely not. I won't say. I was going to say you're a mermaid more than a shark. But,
Thank you. Look, and I think I just want to deal with happy people. And if I was all about the money, it wouldn't be happy people I'd be dealing with, So that's how I have gone through my business. And I guess that's how I've got so many referrals that way, is just doing the right thing by people. And sounds so obvious, I guess. But I always put myself in the shoes of the other person, as with you, I said I don't think it's right for you. So I will say that if I do genuinely believe that.
Yeah, and and I will be coming back when I get those other things right.
Yeah, all good. No worries.
As far as your biggest challenges, what are some of the biggest challenges you face at the moment growing your business?
Oh, look, by far and away is growing a team with me. As most people know, as soon as your business starts growing, your team starts growing, and then you find that your job changes. So for me, I do genuinely love the PPC work. I love numbers. I love optimizing campaigns. But as soon as I grow, I have to remove myself from the tools in that respect, which I kind of don't really want to do because I do really enjoy it. So I'm in kind of that state of how big do I want to go, because ultimately it's about what I'm going to be spending my time doing. And that's what I enjoy doing. So, team is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, and what sort of advice, or how currently are you working through that challenge?
It's a constant challenge. I don't really feel like I'm in the position to be providing other people advice, because it's something that I think one day I feel like I've nailed it. Next day I feel like, oh my God, I've not nailed it. And we've got systems obviously in place. We use Podio, as you know, to manage all our client accounts. But, when you deal with people, there's a human element that is unplanned. And that's just kind of part and parcel of it. So some people seem to have no issues with their team, and perhaps it's the nature of the work. But the work that I do is so variable. It's so bespoke. It's constantly changing that I have to ensure that my team are up to speed on the latest and greatest strategies, because that's what my clients hire me for. And that's hard, whilst also, having all the balls in the air as well,
Yeah, and look, and I often find that some of the people that say that they don't have the challenges, they just haven't uncovered them as yet. They're, humans are humans, so
totally.
it is the biggest challenge that most people face, and I think it is a journey, as you said. You never get perfect at it; it changes every day. And until digital workers and AI completely replace a lot of what we do, I think that's just the way humans are. But there's definitely things you can do to improve. And I think using something like Podio, like a platform that helps make it easy, and having the right platform, the right processes in place, it can certainly mitigate some of that
Totally.
risk.
Yeah.
So onto your typical week. Sort of take me through your typical week. What does that look like?
Well, it's I have 3 little children, so I have a juggle going on. My husband does the morning, so I start work really early, which is great for me, and then that means sort of I finish my day earlier than some people as well. And yeah, so I've shifted my day that way to fit in with my full family life. And yeah, that's what my typical day looks like.
And work from home?
I do work from home, and probably about a year ago I got to a point where I thought, all right, do I get an office? And I kind of stood back and I thought, well, no, why do I need one? My team all work remotely, so it's not like I work with my staff. I don't really have client meetings. Most of my clients I've never actually met because they're all around the world. So it's not to have a client meeting. I'm not lonely, so it's not for social interaction. So why? I actually absolutely love it. So I work from home. But honestly, when I was in corporate, it was my dream back then to work from home. I thought, if I can find a way to work from home, I will have made it. And I thought, when I did, oh, this is fantastic. I wonder if this will wear off. And it has not worn off. It's just the best.
Yeah, look, there was actually a good discussion on a Facebook group that I'm a part of the other day. Someone was saying, I'm getting a bit bored working from home. What do you think I should do? And the majority of people came back and said, you know, you're crazy. Like, working from home is fantastic. So we've got a co-working space that we can go into, but I might use it once a month. And that's normally if I've got to meet someone in the city, which is very rare.
Yep.
Zoom has become my window to the world.
Yep.
That's how I interact, like we are on this podcast, which is brilliant. And I love from home. So, and I'm assuming in your industry that you're in, it may not have had the flexibility that you've got now if you had stayed in that industry. Is that a fair assumption?
Oh, totally. But like, you know, even if I think back then, like, I actually think technology-wise I could have, but they were pretty archaic and were not prepared to make that leap of allowing me, because that was one of the options that I presented to them, because as I said, I really did want to go back, and they said, no, you can't work from home, which is crazy because I totally could have. So, but you know, to juggle kids and all that, what goes on with kids, there's no way I could work in finance anymore. I mean, you know, it just doesn't work. It's not a family friendly industry, sadly, because there's a lot of women that end up leaving, you know, really talented workers who enjoy what they do and have to leave.
Yeah, and actually the prior guest, Vanessa Bennett, actually, I know she worked with you, and she talks about that change. And I know from my wife still works at corporate, and, you know, they'll have a equal opportunity or a diversity meeting, and it'll be at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And it's like, hang on. How can a mum get the kids and everything to school and get everything done and also be at work at 8 o'clock? You know,
I know. And there are mums like where my kids are at school who do work in corporate, like usually more for like domestic bank, like Westpac and like domestic banks, who really, really struggle. And then school holidays. I mean, you know, what do you do in school holidays? And it's just really hard. It's really, really hard.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. School holidays is probably the one time of the year I get a little grumpier when I don't have my me time at home.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. So we'll move on to the next, which is about a cause. And I know we spoke about this in the prep around what you're doing, but just talk a little bit about how you involve yourself in the community and some of the plans for working on a cause down the track.
Yeah. So given my full plate that I have with 3 little kids and a growing business, currently all I feel I've got space to do in my life is really helping out the school. Like the school is, I've got 3 kids at the one school, and so the school are always needing help with events and fundraising, et cetera, et cetera. So I really spend a lot of my time helping out there, because I feel like, you know, we've got 3 kids there, and we need to pull our weight in that respect. And unfortunately, that doesn't really give me much space to do some of the other stuff I like to do. So hopefully when my kids get a bit older, an area that I would actually really love to help in is something that I feel is hits a nerve with me, is homeless people. I think having a home for you to live in and is like one of life's basic necessities, and it astounds me that we're in a first world country and people don't have a home, especially women who have had to flee some awful domestic situation. I just think that's a tragedy. So ideally, that probably would be the first place that I would start. And because before I had kids, I used to sort of, you know, volunteer at not like a Meals on Wheels, but like a food truck in the city for homeless people. And these poor people don't have a meal. I mean, it's just like tragic, and they sleep on the street. I just think like it's really amazing. So yeah, that's when I have a little bit of extra spare time. That's probably, and obviously my commitments will get lesser at the school. I'll fill it with that kind of area.
Brilliant, great. And look, for many listeners, that's the case. If we look at the build, live, give, for a lot of us, we're still in that live phase, and I know you're doing a lot for your community, which is fantastic, and the give part of it will definitely come. So now we sort of move on to the take action round. So it's about, I'll just ask you a couple of quick questions so you can give actionable information or advice to the BLG listeners. So the first is, what's your number one personal productivity tip?
Oh, that's a hard one. I heard someone give someone advice. I can't remember, was it a podcast or I can't remember where I heard it, but I feel what really resonated with me was just take imperfect action. I think people get so bogged down with making things perfect that if you look around at people who have really achieved a lot, they've just done it, like even if it's not perfect. And I'm not saying do a bad job, but it doesn't, do that 80% that's like absolutely good enough and then move on to the next thing. So that's really the mantra that I guess I live by. And yeah, you can improve on it once you start, but I think people get paralysis by analysis and don't do it and then move on.
I think that's great advice, and especially for those that have had a corporate background where really you're rewarded or sometimes you're criticised for not having it perfect. I think that's one of the big changes you've got to make as you run your own business. And I love that progression, not perfection.
Totally.
So I totally agree with you. As far as apps, what are some of the key apps that you use on your mobile phone from time to time?
So Gmail, because I use Google Apps. So that's obviously a one. I use Podio because we use Podio to manage our client accounts, and that's how I communicate with my team. Google Drive because we have a lot of, because I use Google Apps. And then AdWords and Facebook ads have their own app as well. So they're the ones, probably the one that I most use.
Okay, great. And podcasts, you mentioned podcasts previously for some information. What are some of your favourite podcasts that you listen to?
Well, in my space, it's change is the only constant. So I listen to pretty much all the PPC ones, which I do love. I sort of nerd out on all the PPC data stuff. But I also like try and get away from all the businessy ones. So I actually quite like This American Life and Serial. That really good. And I listen to ABC Radio a lot. So I quite like the Conversation Hour, which is an Aussie program on ABC where it's just his name escapes
Richard
me.
Fidler?
Richard Fidler, interview some really interesting people who you would otherwise have never heard of. They're not famous people, but they've just done extraordinary things in their lives, and I always just find I pick up some real interesting stories and nuggets that I sort of hope to use in my life because they're really extraordinary people.
Yeah, look, I haven't listened to that for a couple of years, but that used to be my go-to. And I was sort of around before podcasting became popular. So you've reminded me to go back and listen to that. That's great. And look, you've had a wonderful journey after, leaving because of the complications, which is sort of that sliding door moment. Yeah. And I'm so glad for some of the people that are listening to this that you did have that choice or did make that choice. Looking back on it, what's a bit of advice you'd give someone that's leaving corporate today for them to help on their journey of running their own business?
Probably the most obvious advice is just to start. But I guess, if I reflect back, it has been a really, really long journey with lots of ups and downs. And someone once said to me something which really stayed with me is he said, how bad do you want this? And you have to want it really bad because you're going to have to push through some really low moments because they come. And you have to want it really bad to be able to push through them. And for me, I did because I had no alternative and I didn't want to leave my son to not see him during the week. So I wanted it really bad. I had to make it work. And I'd say that to people, know your why. And at times you have to remind yourself of your why.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And have other people that help you remember that when times get tough. And like you said, some people say that running your own business is, the hardest job in the world. So being an entrepreneur is the hardest job in the world. And I've got to say, after having 18 years in a successful corporate, yes, I agree. It's totally tough, but the upside is enormous, which, you've gone through in this interview. So how can people find more about you and Green Arrow Digital?
Just the best place is to go to greenarrowdigital.com and you can find me there and say good day if you want to. I'd like that.
Brilliant. Well, as I said earlier, what I love about if people do approach you, that your honesty, and if you know you can add value, you certainly will. If you don't, you'll either say no, come back like you did with me, or direct them to where they can. So I think that's a great trait, and we've really loved you sharing your journey today. We wish you all the best. The Build, Live, Give listeners wish you all the best in your future, and we love having you in the Build, Live, Give community. I know you're part of the Facebook group. So Ilana, thanks for being on the show today.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me. It was lots of fun.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give show. If you found this show helpful, please share it with others so we can build businesses, live great lives, and give back to the community. If you would like to join the BLG community, go to our website, www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.